In this video, we start talking about Chapter 6, the government policies, more specifically the price control policies. Compared to Chapter 4, this chapter would be more straightforward because in Chapter 4, we switch the curve, we shifted the curves on the graph when we talk about the change in demand or change in supply or even change in both. But in Chapter 6, we would never shift a curve. Okay? Instead, our focus would be surplus or shortage on the market. Okay? So here, let's get the price control defined in the first place. They are the legal restrictions on how high or low a market price may go. Okay, so here we have two types of price controls. The first one is price ceiling. Price ceiling is the legal maximum on the price. Okay, it works just like the physical ceiling of our house or classroom. We would always stay below it, right? So on a market with the price ceiling, nobody is allowed to go above it. Okay, that's why it's called legal maximum on the price. Now, a popular example of price ceiling is the rent control. In this country, many middle-class families or poor people living in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City find that the housing is just too expensive. There's no way they can afford it. Okay? So they don't have enough money in their pockets, but they do have the votes. And they lobby the local government to put a price ceiling on the housing market. For example, if a two bedroom apartment in New York City, the rent control is $2,000. Okay, we're just making up a number, and that means the landlord can charge $2,000 or less, but he or she cannot go even $1 above it. Okay. Oftentimes on the ground, the city council will decide how much your rent can go up for next year. All right. And so this is the price ceiling. Okay. And we also have the second type of price control, which is price floor. The price floor is a legal minimum on the price. Again, it works just like the physical floor of our house or classroom. We always stay above it. Okay? So on a market with a price floor, everybody needs to stay on or above the floor. You cannot go below it. The most popular example is minimum wage. Okay? And later this chapter, you would find us spend a lot of time talking about the minimum wage law. This is actually the most important reason we want to check out this chapter. Okay? Some of you probably know that at this moment, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. So for example, if you're working for the federal government or these contractors, they receive the money from the federal government, you will get paid at least $7.25 per hour. If the employer wants to pay you more, that's totally fine, but they cannot pay you below $7.25. Okay? Now, before we jump into a more technical discussion, let's briefly talk about the rationale behind these price control policies. Okay? Now, the popular reason a price control is introduced on the market is because of these national or local emergencies. Okay? For example, the country gets involved in a war with its neighboring countries, or even just the civil wars. Okay? Or there's a earthquake, flooding, wildfire, these natural disasters. Okay? Or what is happening now is, because of the COVID-19 crisis, right? We find that government comes in and control, or it could just punish those sellers on the market who charge extremely high price for hand sanitizers or face masks or some medical equipment, right? So putting together, when we have a national or local emergency, government gets plenty of reasons or excuses to come in to the market and control the price, because we're already in a chaotic situation. We don't want the situation to be worse. Okay. And more importantly, for these kind of reasons, it's always temporary. Okay. So when the national emergency is gone, then we should remove the price controls. Okay. And these are actually not the focus of our discussion in this chapter. Okay. What we would like to focus is a more common or regular circumstances where the government tells us they are doing all of these price controls in order to help the poor. Okay? For example, the rent control we mentioned. So they said that, because housing is just too expensive. Okay? And so when they introduced the price control or the rent control on the housing market, the poor and the middle class families can afford it. Okay? We want to look at if the price controls really help the poor, or under what circumstances they do not help the poor, where it could go wrong. These are what we're gonna talk about in the next few videos.